Welcome to Football Today, team profiles and projections. And today we are looking at the Baltimore Ravens. Justin, they come in our power rankings at number 3 after a 13-4 season. Last year they were 4th in offensive scoring, 1st in defensive scoring. This is John Harbaugh's 17th season in the NFL as a head coach. 2nd longest tenured, only after Mike Tomlin. By 1 year, Justin. Todd Monken, his 2nd season as OC after coming over from Georgia. And Zach Orr, his 1st season as defense coordinator, only 32 years old, was the inside linebacker coach after they lost Mike McDonald, Denard Wilson, and Anthony Weaver. They were the number 1 team in the NFL last year. Lamar Jackson won MVP, and they had the number 1 defense. They blew out the 49ers, the Lions, the Texans, the Browns, and the Dolphins.
Yep.
They had a 6-2 record versus playoff teams when playing their starters. A 10-3 record versus winning teams when playing their starters.
Yep.
But in the end, they fell short of their ultimate goal. They lost 7 starters, including 3 offensive linemen. They lost their defensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel, to the Seahawks. But they also lost their 2 top defensive coordinators in Denard Wilson and Anthony Weaver. They missed their opportunity.
Yes. I'm glad you started off by telling about their record against winning teams and against teams above 500, because what the Ravens did last year is they kicked ass. And they beat good teams. There was no oh, well, the Ravens have a good record, but if you look at their record against good teams, it's this and that. And if you look at this and you look at that, no, man. There's none of that.
They beat them. They beat the shit out of them.
Yes, that's the thing. Where it's like, this is the Ravens' year, and it has to be the Ravens' year. Because they did a lot of that without Mark Andrews. Like, everything seemed to be lining up perfectly for the playoffs. Mark Andrews comes back. They're healthy. They're going. They have players that are reaching career years. Justin Amadebuke, Kyle Van Noy. Where did you come from? Jadeveon Clowney, you exist having career years. Kyle Hamilton, young superstars breaking out. Geno Stone, the 3rd safety, leading the league in interceptions, being one of the leaders. Sure, hello, come on down. And all that to lose to freaking Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs' down year, 17-10 in a home playoff game, man. And this is where I'm going to get a little frustrated because, I don't know if I was thinking this at the moment, but kind of looking back on it, looking at the game book for the Chiefs and the Ravens, this is what I did. I looked at the first half summary. I looked at the game book for that. I'm like, what happened in that game, man? Lamar Jackson had 8 rushing attempts. Gus Edwards had 3 against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were 28th in rushing EPA on defense last year. The Ravens made their identity around Lamar Jackson and running the ball. They had 9 attempts for 46 yards. 36 of them coming for 2 plays from Gus Edwards and Lamar in the first half. So it wasn't just about them not running it enough. Maybe it was about their lack of efficiency. But sure, let's even talk about this in that specific game. The Ravens had 3 running back early down runs throughout the entire game, Bobby Skinner, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. That's it. Oh, yeah. And it was raining. So Lamar Jackson ends up with 37 pass attempts in a 17-10 game against the Kansas City Chiefs at home with bad weather, and they had 3 first down running back rushing attempts. 3! Against one of the worst rush defenses in the National Football League, and 37 pass attempts against one of the best passing defenses in the National Football League, a top 5 one last year. I didn't get it. I'm frustrated by it. I'm still salty about it because last year was the Ravens' year because you look at how much they lost. Coaching, players, 3 offensive linemen, defensive players. I don't know if it's going to be the same, and I have doubts.
I don't think it's going to be the same, right? We're not talking about this team that has just been, AFC Championship game every single year, powerhouse. They're going to replace the town and be sick. That hasn't been what the Ravens have been. There was the last AFC Championship game before this year was with Joe Flacco at quarterback. But they were so damn good this year. Here's the main thing, Justin, is we usually on these episodes do our additions and losses at the end. I think we need to start with it.
That's fair.
Here's their new additions, notable free agency. Derrick Henry.
Good.
That's it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On the loss end, you have Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, he was injured last year, Odell Beckham Jr., Morgan Moses, Kevin Zeitler, John Simpson, Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, Geno Stone. And I'll be honest, I don't like their draft class either. Nate Wiggins, I think, is going to be good. Nate Wiggins in the first round. After that, Roger Rosengarten, he's not going to be good for them. Adisa Isaac, maybe 2 years from down the road. Tez Walker is not very good. TJ Tampa in the fourth is a nice pick. And then you get Rasheen Ali. I don't know much about him, to be honest. Devin Leary, a quarterback, waste of a pick. Nick Samak, and then Sanosi Kane. This is not a draft class that's going to help them win games this year, outside of Nate Wiggins. I don't think there's any pick on here outside Nate Wiggins that contributes to wins and losses this year.
No, man. That may be one of the worst. I'm not going to say it's the worst wins, like in terms of additions and losses plus draft class. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the worst because I don't have every team memorized on the top of my head, but it's got to be top 3. Like, worst discrepancy, right?
Yeah. But let's talk about this team because they are good.
They're good.
We're talking about number 3 in the power rankings, and we're just like, everything's screwed. I mean, Lamar balled last year. Obviously won the MVP. He really pushed the ball down the field last year. And the second highest average depth of target after Stroud. And again, he wasn't doing it with all these great weapons. Now, the offensive line was good, but they weren't killing. Like, Zay Flowers is probably a high-end wide receiver, too, in the NFL. To me, capable of putting up 1,000 years, in multiple years, especially on this offense right now. He had 858 yards as a rookie. But Mark Andrews is their wide receiver 1. And like you mentioned, they missed him for 7 games last year, and Lamar was still able to put up MVP numbers. Now, it wasn't your typical MVP year. They were 21st in passing yards, but they were 5th in yards per attempt, 6th in EPA per play. And then Lamar obviously adds on the ground with his, 800 rushing yards.
Yeah, and Lamar took a step up last year where he had, they moved away from Greg Roman. And, you have Lamar that the expectation is to be a little bit more of a conventional drop back passer. Now, they still run, like a lot of these heavy running formations, they still run Patrick Ricard as a weapon that we're going to talk about. They have multiple tight ends. And I think they should lean into that because of once again, the lack of personnel that they have at wide receiver. Isn't it crazy that Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham Jr., and Zay Flowers are it's the best 11 it's the best 3 set of wide receivers that Lamar Jackson has ever worked with. Rashad Bateman, who I view as a bust of a first round pick.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Odell Beckham Jr., who I will say was a good deep threat, but still a washed version of Odell Beckham Jr., and then a rookie year Zay Flowers. That is the best trio of wide receivers that Lamar Jackson has ever worked with in his career, and you saw what he did with it. Did great things with it. And he did become more of a conventional drop back passer.
I was going to say, they challenged him to do that, and he did it really well. Like I said, they played good defenses, man, and they tore him up. So Todd Monken's he's going to be an NFL head coach, I think, fairly soon with what he did. And like you mentioned, they did not ditch the things that made them work in the run game, the heavy personnel, using Patrick McCart, pulling your guys like crazy. Now, part of what makes it work great is you have, Kevin Zeitler and Morgan Moses and John Simpson. I really feel bad about that unit, but I want to talk about the pause of the run game. Derrick Henry, he is their one, key addition. I think it's a great addition, though. Derrick Henry in this run game with Lamar Jackson and Patrick McCart, they're the number 1 rushing team in the NFL again.
Yep.
I don't think there's when you factor in quarterback rushing yards, I don't think it's even. I think only Detroit could challenge, and even then, I don't think they have a shot at really beating them in total rushing yards.
No, I think they have to lean into it, man. I think Derrick Henry, sure, he's not as explosive as he once was.
Also faced the second most stacked boxes last year. It was. He put up 1,000 yards with everything stacked against him last year.
But he's still very good. Still very good. Like I said, not as explosive as he once was, but the yards after contact is still good. The yards after contact was still, I think, top third. I think he was 13th in it last year. Derrick Henry is still very good, man, and he is by far and away the best running back that Lamar, that's ever worked with Lamar Jackson and has been in this offense the last couple of years. So I am so excited for this pairing this year, especially with a guy like Patrick Ricard leading the way.
Henry played behind one of a bottom 5 offensive line last year, and teams being we are going to stop you, Derrick Henry, and still put up 1,000 yards. Like you said, it wasn't his best efficiency year, wasn't his most explosive year, but now that he's not going to, like, you still have Tyler Linderbaum at center who you can move around a bit, and they're gonna move their guys. It should be a nasty, and like you said, right? Like, they did a lot more drop back passing and stuff, and you talk about the AFC Championship game. This should be a team that they're not a Greg Roman offense, Justin, but they kind of like, this is what we do, though. This is our advantage, is we will run right down your throat all game long. And when you start doing that, we're going to throw the ball over the top of you because they have the personnel to do that.
Yeah. And what I really meant from the AFC Championship game is really highlighting that the Chiefs were a really good pass defense and a really bad run defense. But that's what I feel like the strength of this coaching staff and the strength of a Harbaugh-led team has always been, we're gonna coach to the players' strengths, and we're gonna coach to what we feel like the other team doesn't do well. And if you're playing a team, and this Ravens offense is still dangerous, where I feel like Lamar can take the top off a defense, right? But if you have a team that's bad against the run, just continue to lean into it, because I feel like they've done that as the years have gone on, and particularly in that playoff game, it got away from them. And like I said, I am still salty about it.
So, I mean, they were the number 4 scoring offense, number 6 knee paper play, 21st in total passing, 1st in total rushing, 5th in passing yards per attempt, 3rd in rushing yards per carry. We talked about they lost the offensive lineman. The receiving group is mostly the same. Nelson Aguilar is going to be starting where Odell Beckham Jr. was. I don't think Odell is much of a loss. I don't think they should have brought him in the first place. Mark Andrews hopefully healthy, but you do lose those 3 offensive linemen and add Derrick Henry. Where do you see this offense looking like this year? Because I still think it's like a top 8 unit.
But it rests on the offensive line, man, right? It's so much rests on the offensive line because there's just major questions. Because there's just players that we haven't seen, Bobby.
Yeah, I agree. But I think there's enough talent to overcome offensive line issues. But so I still think they're going to be like a top 8 unit or whatever. But we're judging this team on winning Super Bowls or not, and that's where I'm like,
this is not a Super Bowl roster.
Okay, let's say they went 11-6 last year and they lost in the wild card, or won a wild card game, lost in a division game or something. Right? They'd be number 7 in our power rankings. We'd be like, they got all this, but it is because last year feels like such a missed opportunity, and there's no doubting that they got worse.
Right.
That's why it kind of has a little bit of like negative undertones around the number 3 team in our power rankings, even though I don't think I had them 3rd.
But I really, for me, it is the offensive line though. Like it's not just the fact that they let us down from last year, even though I've spent the majority of this TPP talking about how they let me down from last year. If they carried some of these offensive linemen back, right, or made just better improvements there, like Ronnie Stanley misses games every year. So I'm not penciling him in for 17, 16, or 15 games. He's going to miss some games. So then who is going to be your tackle? Andrew Voorhees tore his ACL at the Combine a couple years ago, right? Running the 40. Strong prospect coming out of USC. We haven't seen him play football. Tyler Linderbaum, awesome, good. Daniel Falele, hello. It was supposed to be Ben Cleveland over the offseason from Georgia. Daniel Falele, who I'm kind of excited to see at guard. He's a big dude, but he's athletic. But he's been a tackle his entire NFL career, so he's transitioning to guard, but he's barely played tackle. And then, like you said, Roger Rosengarten, the rookie, who will be raw. Yeah,
and he's weak too.
Yeah.
I don't see Roger Rosengarten having any success as a rookie. I think they're going to start the Kamari, I believe his name is, right?
Yeah, Patrick McCarry.
Yeah, Patrick McCarry.
You also have Josh Jones from Houston as well, who was a backup tackle.
He's like a solid swing tackle option in the NFL. But it's not going to be good like it was last year when you lose a all-pro. I mean, the Lions made their offensive line stronger with one of those guys, and the Jets have taken one of the weakest offensive lines and turned it to one of the best with the 2 guys they lost in Moses and Simpson. Let's talk about them defensively, though. They still have a ton of talent, even though they lost some guys, right? Jadeveon Clowney's gone after a career year. You lose Patrick Queen, who played really good next to, Roquan Smith, and lose Geno Stone. But this is where the talent stays. And there's we can hit this from a bunch of different angles, Justin. I mean, what do you want to talk about first? The safety duo of Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, Matabuke, Roquan Smith. I mean, we're talking about a defense that's got all pros.
I want to start up front because that's where I always like to start off.
Yeah, I mean, they only had
sacks.
The only more productive defensive tackle last year than Matabuke was Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, and Quentin Williams. Is that freaking good? Are Bonita fish big? 13 sacks, 18 quarterback hits, 18 pressures, 14th in win rate, right? So maybe he doesn't have the same exact production next year, but he did put himself in a new level for what he had been doing previously in his career.
Yeah, and credit to him because it was year 4, right? Year 4, and he had 5.5 sacks in 2022, but 2023 just reaches that new stratosphere. And I give a lot of credit to like a guy like Mike McDonald that kind of came in here, and there were so many players on this defense that had career years last year.
Oh yeah, and Mike McDonald put them together. So this is why I want to start with the defense. So we talk about the offensive line losses on the offense being huge. They lost Mike McDonald, who is viewed as like the best defensive coordinator in football. I think he's the only defensive coach outside of Quinn that got hired last year. No, Raheem Morris, but he was the guy, Mike McDonald. Then they lose Denard Wilson, who was everybody's defensive coordinator right? Like he coached the Eagles DBs, then he come over to the Ravens DBs. Like, okay, this is it. Titans get him. Then Anthony Weaver, the associate head coach and D-line coach, he goes to the Dolphins as their defensive coordinator, and they're left to put Zach Orr, who's only been coaching for like 7 years at 32 years old. He's their defensive coordinator. Like, I don't think you can just copy and paste what Mike McDonald did and think it's going to work out, because it's not like he's a Mike McDonald disciple who's been in it for years, right? He's been with Mike McDonald for 2 years.
And there was player development there too. Like very, very good player development. Guys that were in different places or even with the Ravens for a couple years that started to play well and better and have their career years. And interested to see if that will happen again. I'm not going to say it's not, but interested to see if that's going to happen again.
Yeah. And, you think of where guys, Patrick Queen obviously took some steps up, but it does start up front, like you said, with Matabuke. The rest of the guys on that front, you do lose Clowney coming off of a career year. Odafe Owe, he needs to continue the upward trend as he becomes a more of a full-time player. Like he only had the 60th most pass rush snaps for an edge last year, so he wasn't getting starter snaps, and he had, Van Noy who was getting a lot of snaps, and then Clowney on that career year. But he had 5 sacks. He was 9th out of 61 edges in win rate, 12th in pressure percentage. If he continues those numbers on a more of a full-time role, we're talking about a guy who's top 15 in total sacks, hits, and pressures for edge.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised because I have a very stereotypical mindset of these Penn State edge rushers that are like Arnold
They got
DB
another
Katie.
one, by the way.
Yeah, yes, and they mostly come from this team where, like Arnold DB Katie, like these guys that are fun athletes in college, but they don't actually do anything in the NFL. And Owe was one of the guys that was kind of leading that charge. So I'm really glad to hear that there's development there. And again, another player that didn't really show much of anything. Mike McDonald comes in, these coaches come in, and there is development there, and now they're gone. Will that continue?
Right. A guy who I do see developing a little bit, he's my X factor. Travis Jones, the defensive tackle out of UConn from a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
His first 11 games, he had 0 sacks, 0 quarterback hits, 8 pressures. Final 6 games, the starter to come along for him. 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 10 pressures. I like Travis Jones a lot. I know you did too. I think you viewed him as like a high 2nd-round pick, Justin.
Yeah.
I think he takes a step forward, and then it's a lot of ifs. But like, if Travis Jones takes a step forward, if Owe continues to have the same production with more snaps, Matabuke, and then Kyle Van Noy does what he did last year at 34 years old, then you're not talking about this great front, but it's a pretty damn good front considering what the back end and the linebackers they have behind him.
No, that's a great X factor because Travis Jones coming out of UConn, one of those interior defensive linemen that viewed him as a run stuffer. Like, yeah, you're a good run stuffer, but there could be some pass rush stuff there just with your overall strength. wouldn't say that pass rush would be his strength. So actually, like his overall strength as a player, it is his run defense. So actually glad to see that he ramped up the pass rush production to end the final 6 games. Matabuke went from a player that didn't get sacks his first 2 years, and then with 5.5 in year 3, and then obviously exploded in year 4. Travis Jones would love if he can follow that same trajectory, because I loved him coming out of UConn. Just seemed like one of those slam dunk players that wouldn't fail in the NFL. And sometimes it takes interior defensive lineman a second to hit.
Yeah, sometimes it's that third year for them. And then Roquan Smith behind him. I mean,
he's good.
Where's he in your linebacker rankings? He's number 2 after Fred Warner for me.
Yep, yeah, gotta be.
He's a freaking beast. I love him so much. The Ravens trading for him. And I know the Bears have done some good things. But, like, sometimes, like, what if the Bears didn't trade Roquan Smith? That would be kind of sick right now, right? Because I think he's a monster and he's worth, paying for. And you saw it right away, even, not last year, but the year before. That first game versus the Saints, he came in and he's like,
oh, yeah.
Like, he changed the Mike McDonald defense. And that's one thing that is not, leaving this team is he does everything well, whether it's, the run defense, the coverage, or even as a pass rusher, even though he doesn't do it a ton. Like, he just flies all over the field. He's smart. Like, he allows you. So the other thing because I'm not the biggest Patrick Queen fan in the world, right? But who I'm not a fan of at all has been Trenton Simpson. I don't know if he can just play linebacker in the NFL. If they can make Trent Simpson, who's like this crazy athlete, play well next to Roquan, then you're starting to cook with this defense where I'm like, you know what? They can be a top 3 unit despite losing all of their coaches, basically.
Yeah, man.
Like, if they could get Trent Simpson, because on the back end, I know they lost Geno Stone. I kind of feel better about them on the back end, right? Depending on health. Like, Nate Wiggins, I try to not take much away from preseason football. One position I can from is corner. Nate Wiggins maybe had the best cornerback preseason of any player in the NFL. Like, he dominated. He stopped people from completing stuff, got his hands on the football. If you get him with Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevenson and then Hamilton and Marcus Williams behind them, again, this is a defense that was number 1 in the NFL last year. Their losses were Jadeveon Clowney and Patrick Queen and Geno Stone. No reason for them to not be right at that level again.
Yeah.
Depending on the coaching, right?
Right.
Depending on the coaching.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Why don't you talk about Kyle Hamilton for a little bit?
He's good. I mean, I think he's versatile. You could put him all over the field. I mean, I don't really have metrics pulled up right away, but I mean,
he's literally great at everything you ask him to do.
Yeah,
like literally put him.
It's huge.
Like, you put him in man zone, blitz him. There was a game. Now, this was a lot of Mike McDonald scheming stuff where he had like those 3 sacks in a game, and again, like you said, he does play all over the field, right? 403 snaps at slot corner, 250 snaps down in the box, and then 275 snaps down deep, or back deep. He plays, it's like, looks like a 40, a 40-30-30 split, and that'll be, so that's like not an X factor as Kyle Hamilton, but that's one thing I'm watching for with the new defensive coordinator is how do you use Kyle Hamilton?
Yeah,
because you can't copy and paste what Mike McDonald did, because Mike McDonald used him so many different ways.
Right. And I love that he led the team in pass deflections last year with 13. I mean, you're putting Kyle Hamilton in situations where he can go after the football and play the football and be great at it, which is awesome. So, yeah, I think we kind of touched on it with this defense, Bobby. Kind of like top to bottom.
We didn't. Marcus Williams, who's a freaking beast, one of the best safety duo in the NFL. So they have like the best safety duo in the NFL, the number 2 linebacker, and a good what should be a good front. This defense should be cooking. So we did the additions, we did the losses, did the draft class. My X factor is Travis Jones. Who's your X factor?
My X factor is Ronnie Stanley. If you can give me a season of being healthy and being a left tackle and trying to solidify the offensive line, that's great. I mean, I would like to give it to like Andrew Voorhees. Can you be a good guard? But I'll give it to an important position. Ronnie Stanley, you're good. Just be out there.
What do you think this team's over/under was? I was shocked.
I would view it as 9.5.
Yeah, their over-under's 9.5.
Yeah.
So it's over.
Yeah. Yeah, until proven otherwise. I don't want to doubt Lamar. Lamar's good. Lamar's good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Where it's like, I know we started with kind of some negative negative tone, in the beginning, but it's like if it's just because of how much good they were last year and they didn't get it done.
You know,
like,
in a way,
this is still
maybe
a
Lamar,
really good team.
In a way, maybe Lamar's had worse. I think this is the worst offensive line that he's played with, and I think that's a question. But I think the he's had worse receivers to work with. You know, maybe a Greg Roman not necessarily giving him keys to success as an explosive passer, just kind of running the ball, running the same kind of offense that's getting figured out, right? So I think Lamar's good, and he's gonna carry the Ravens through whatever they got, and they still have a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball too.
Absolutely. All right, that's the Baltimore Ravens, and this is Football Today.